Alright guys, welcome to RC Mojo. Today we're back with the Tiger and we're going to tackle another of the little annoying bits. When you turn the tank on, the headlights flash to indicate the electronics are running and the engine is off, which makes perfect sense for a toy grade model. It makes sure the owner doesn't leave it turned on. When you start the engine, the lights are on permanently. It's nice that they're there, but it would be nice to be able to turn them off. There's also the scale aspect. The stock lights are just a simple housing with a 5mm LED sticking out. Of course, the aftermarket has us covered. Taygen do some metal headlights. There's the early type we have here, one per side, and they do the late single centrally mounted type too. The best bit though is they have the cover over the light with a slit in to reduce the risk of being spotted by enemy aircraft. Right, first we need to separate the upper hull, disconnecting the big connector and the BB wiring. The stock lights are plugged into holes in the top hull with the LED legs poking through the bottom, designed for the cheapest possible assembly and the least amount of parts. If you grab the lights you can wobble them quite a bit, which would suggest they're only glued at the bottom. It looks a lot like it's only the LED legs that have glue on them. If we twist the lights we should be able to break them free. And there we go, complete with the wires. Same goes for the other side. Give them a good twist and a bit of a pull and out they come. The new light should drop straight in. If they don't go all the way down you may need to clear some of the glue from the bottom of the hole. Depends how generous the person with the glue was. This one was pretty mean, so the lights just drop straight in. Speaking of glue, we need a little bit of 5-minute epoxy to stop the lights from falling out. We don't need a lot, just enough to add a smear on the posts. Pop them in and carefully line them up so they're pointing in the right direction, and when the epoxy is hardened we can move on to the wiring. First job is to remove the remains of the stock wires. If you were doing a straight swap you would be connecting the new lights to where the stock ones were connected, but we're not, so we need to remove the wires altogether. To make it nice and tidy, remove the little connector PCB with its screws and clip the wires right at the solder joints. With no wire stubs floating around, we won't risk anything shorting. Just snip the right ones as the machine gun wires are pretty close to the ones we want. Board back in, and the only bit of dodgy wiring we're left with is the machine gun LED. But we've got something on the way to change that, but that's going to be next time. Anyway, to control the headlights we're going to use another one of our simple light controllers, the same type of board we used on the little Tamiya Jimny. It's got 2 light channels and we're going to be using channel A for the headlights. As far as I can tell, the Taygen LEDs haven't got any form of current control built in, so we're going to need a couple of resistors. We don't have any specs, but a fair guess would be a 3.5 volt forward voltage, 20 milliamp current, and we have a 5 volt supply. If you work that out, it gives us around 82 ohms. But since we don't know the real specs, we're going to be using 220 ohms, which is well on the safe side and will still give us plenty of light. The headlights come with loads of wire, so we're going to need to cut them to length and strip the ends. The lights also come with some heat shrink, so we're going to use that to protect the thin wires. Right, we're going to wire the LEDs in parallel. The 2 black wires need to connect together. To make it easy to solder, we can twist them together nice and tightly before tinning the ends. We need to do something similar with the 2 resistors. With them next to each other, twist up one end 5mm or so, tin the twist and cut off the excess. Final bit of the LED wiring now. I've already tinned the pads on the board, so we just need to solder the black wires to the negative pad of channel A, solder the twisted end of the resistors to the positive pad, and solder one of the red wires to each resistor. To stick the controller in, we're going to use some more servo tape, which just leaves routing the LED wires. We'll need to heat up the heat shrink a bit, not only to shrink it, but also to soften it so we can curve it without getting any kinks. To keep it in place, a couple of blobs of hot glue will do the job. Like the servo tape, it gives a good strong bond, but you can still peel it off if you want to change things later. It's good stuff, unless you live somewhere particularly hot. Well, it's all wired up, time for a test. The standard connectors can reconnect to the RX-18, and the light controller plugs into a spare channel on the FlySky receiver that's assigned to a 2-position switch on the transmitter. Here we go then. Nice! We can now control the lights independently of the engine, driving at night without giving away our position to enemy aircraft. Okay, While I've got the iron out, I'm going to rewire the main power switch. In its current state, it won't be long before the wires break off and potentially short out the battery, which really wouldn't be good. There's already strands of wire that come very close to making a short, which really isn't brilliant. It's a pretty simple job to rewire it. First though, we need to remove the wires. We need something with some weight to hold the switch. Not having to chase it around the desk makes everything so much easier. The wire ends are a bit of a mess, so I'm going to cut them off and start from fresh. All the bare ends need tinning, making sure the solder wicks all the way through. We'll start with the RX18 end's red wire. We need to pop some heat shrink over, then solder the end across the two central posts. Next the battery end, more heat shrink, and solder it across the posts at one end. When the switch is at this end, it's going to be in the on position. The black wires need to connect together. The stock wiring has them on the third pair of posts on the switch. This basically shorts the power and ground on the RX18 when it's turned off. There are pros and cons to this, but for this install I'd rather have the negative well insulated from the positive, so I'll be soldering the black wires together with some heat shrink. So now if one of the red wires fails, it's far less likely to find a way to short out the battery. Anyway, the heat shrink on the red wires needs to get pushed as far over the post as you can and shrunk with a heat gun. The two unconnected pins can get a little bit of heat shrink as well, and the heat shrink over the join on the black wire needs to get shrunk. What we're left with is a switch that's a lot safer than the stock one. Stress relief on the wires, and everything is at least partially insulated. Before we apply power to the system, we need to check the switch is working as it should. This is where a nice little multimeter with a continuity mode comes in handy. When there's a complete circuit, the meter beeps. We expect the negative wires to always be connected together, and the positive to be switched by the switch. And importantly, the positive and negative should never connect together. Well, not surprisingly, it all checked out okay, but it's still a good idea to make sure. A shorted out battery really isn't a whole lot of fun. The battery wires are still quite long, so to keep them out of the gearboxes we can use a couple of zip ties to keep them safe. Right, last quick test. Battery connected, the transmitter's already on, tank on, and off we go. You might notice we've got a red flashing light up on the speaker now. Since we don't have the blinky headlights anymore, it lets us see that the ppm to Heng Long adapter is setting itself up. Once the tank is armed, it goes out. With any luck, it will be visible through the vents in the upper hull. Everything looks to be working, so we can pop the top on. Fit the intake hoses, I still need to come up with some sort of quick release for them, and we can power up the tank. There's the red LED blinking away. It will keep blinking quickly until the controls on the transmitter are all centered, then go out. Nice, that works. Well, now we can drive the tank without the headlights on, but unlike just cutting the wires, we can still turn them on whenever we want, with or without the engine running. And there we go then, another step along the way to building this Tiger. Looking inside the hull makes me think the final wiring tidy up is going to be a lot of fun. There's a lot of wires in there, and we've not added all the electronic widgets yet. Right then, that's it for this week. Remember, a little bit of soldering, or soldering if you're so inclined, never hurt anyone. Unless you drop the iron and try and grab it. That does hurt. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you're not already subscribed, why not click the button? It's free after all. And if you like, don't forget there's a like button ready to be clicked as well. Bye guys.